I'm Scott Lucas. This is World Unfiltered. The global economy, to say the least, is in a very interesting situation, using that phrase in the Chinese sense of living in interesting times. The pandemic comes on top of the Great Recession of 2008, 2009. Many countries have seen fluctuating economies in terms of employment, in terms of inflation, in terms of their investment. At the same time, we hear word of competing economic models, the long-standing Western Europe, US model of growth, but now the question of a Chinese model, a different way of organizing the world in terms of its economic system, even as the Chinese try to face the fact of how they deal with being an outsider when it comes to global financial systems. But on top of that, from challenges come opportunities. Proposals to link the cyber economy, to link the different ways that we are working with each other in the 21st century to models that will produce growth, not just for some, but for all. Models such as Global Society 5.0. Within that, Turkey faces its own individual challenges. A significant drop in output in the middle of 2020, although there's been a recovery since then, it's been a limited one. We have inflation at around 16%, unemployment 10%, and a Turkish currency that hit record lows against the dollar and the euro only in July of last year and is only slowly recovering. So what does this mean for the globe and for Turkey within it? Well, I thought I would turn to someone who knows, Bahadır Kaleağası. Bahadır Kaleağası is the president of the Bosphorus Institute. He is the former Secretary General of the Turkish Industry and Business Association, and he's a man with global experience, having served in Washington, having been in Brussels for 31 years. In other words, someone who links the base in Turkey with experience in the United States, in Europe. In other words, a man with a global sense of what has happened in the past and therefore what might happen in the future. Mr. Kaleagasi, thank you for joining me on World Unfiltered.
Thank you, Professor Lucas. Thank you to Onur Özçelik as well. It's a great pleasure to join this analytical program. I am very pleased and honored.
Well, the honor is mine, because immediately I'm going to ask you to help me out and help the viewers out. This concept of Society 5.0, educate us. What does it mean in an economic sense? What does it mean in a social sense? What makes it distinctive from Society 4.0, for example?
Well, of course, it is a simplistic way of trying to qualify very complex changes that are unfolding not on the basis of mechanical physics, but quantum physics. So it's not that much easy, and they are weird, they are strange, and those changes are difficult maybe to grasp in our lifespan, in our time-space continuum. However, we should try to, of course, understand them as much as possible. I don't know if I have the answers, but I'm trying to have the right questions at least. And the 5.0, of course, it's about going beyond the fourth industrial revolution. The industry 1.0 was industrial revolution, the first one by the end of 18th century, with, of course, steam power, more mobility in the factory plants, in workshops turning to factory plants, transport, train, ships, rise of the bourgeoisie, demand for political power, taxpayers' democracy, French Revolution, American Revolution, British evolution, and so on. And the second one is toward the end of the 19th century with, of course, electric power, oil, demand for popular democracy, colonization, conflicts of interests, First World War, and the third one during and right after the Second World War is the electronic revolution and the rise of the, of course, consumer society, Cold War years, space technology, and space race between the Soviet Union and United States of America. And the fourth one, which started by the end of 90s, it is the fusion between the physical and the cyberspace with all kinds of new technologies and automation, the computers obviously, but more than that, of course, artificial intelligence and Internet of Things, 3G, nanotechnologies. And 5.0 is about to little bit cut with this way of thinking in terms of industrial technology, evolution as the main determinant of human fate, and trying to inject into the debate and into our ideals, into our demands as electors, as taxpayers. Something more than that, a society which is not main and exclusively determined by technology and economic growth, but also by social and ecological considerations linked with income disparity, education, digital cities, so that they all are seen as the main indicators of also the economic success, be it of the companies, individuals, or of the countries. It was launched firstly by Japan during its G20 presidency. I was a delegate of B20 in Tokyo at that time, so it was not business, but G20, of course. And in the B20, we also discussed a lot about that with the Japanese and other countries' politicians, prime ministers, ministers. And then today, it is more and more, of course, spelled out. As early as this year, the European Commission launched its own strategy of Industry 5.0. The more and more in the financial world, there is talk about social and environmental reporting as the main indicators of good governance. And in a nutshell, Sustainable Development Goals of the United Nations, 70 goals, create a general, of course, not very deep, superficial, but still a general and widely accepted framework to define, to give an idea of what we can mean in simplifying the transition to a better future as Society 5.0.
That's a great explanation. So we're talking about, in a sense, sustainability, not just for one country, but for all of us in terms of a social and environmental sustainability. Here's the challenge for me. We still get, at least my news feed is always, what's your gross domestic product? You heard that in the introduction. So how much is each country growing, which we measure in terms of, some type of economic figure. We get, how's the stock market doing today? So if it's, Wall Street, or if it's the FTSE index in London. In other words, there still seems to be an organizational communication which is very much on national growth, based not on the social or the environmental, but these sort of basic economic markers that we've had for decades. So don't you have to, in a sense, change the mindset? Don't we have to have like a social equivalent of what we call the stock market, that somehow we could measure progress for all? And how would we do that?
Absolutely. This is social responsibility. This is charity. This is being good species as the human life forms in this planet. But this is also about not saving the planet. The Earth will stay there, will remain there as long as the sun will continue to be there. We are not saving the planet, we are not saving the Earth, but we are saving our own civilization. Now, this is even more than that in the shorter term. This is also saving our companies, our financial profits, even from the prism of a purely, exclusively materialistic, profit-oriented, opportunistic filterage. The Sustainable Development Goals matter. They will, from now on, make a company also more profitable. This is one of the, of course, trends accelerated by the ongoing pandemic. The societies demand that. Even now, financial institutions, in their end-of-year reports last year, most of them declared that it is a main parameter in allowing credits, for example.
Okay, so there can be shifts in markets. Are we seeing any national government at this point which is really changing its economic strategy to move from more of that nationally oriented growth approach to actually making social and environmental and as it were, a transnational social environmental goals very much part of the national strategy? Has Japan done it, having introduced the concept? Are there others who have done this, possibly in Scandinavia? Do we have someone to look to at this point?
Well, of course, there are some successful countries. They all have the, of course, privilege of not being too big, let's say, and not surrounded by, of course, that's a joke, but bad neighbors. However, but there is Finland, you will say. But notwithstanding all that, of course, there are some axes of progress, but they do not all constitute yet a system of progress. Axis of progress, one of them is European Green Deal. It's fine, and Europe with super soft power, it is imposing that to the production qualities and service qualities of all of the rest of the world willing to do business with the European Union. And the majority of the rest of the world is doing business with European Union, and European Union is their most important partner. So that is already one thing. And even in the agreement for Brexit, an important and distinctively successful chapter concerns the continuation of British policies aligned with the European Green Deal. As of the, of course, conclusion of that deal, we'll see whether there will be divergences or convergences in the next years. But this is the situation today. And then, with the end of Trump's disastrous term in the United States, Washington is back to the Paris Climate Change Agreement. That is also fine. Now we will have the climate summit in November in Glasgow, in the United Kingdom, so far. Thus, there will be a moment of truth where probably almost all the countries, and hopefully Turkey too, will reconfirm or confirm their engagement to zero emission by mid-century, by 2050, including China. So there is a climate competition between China and United States. And climate competition is not only a competition for the targets or the soft power generated by committing itself to that target, but also on the technology of climate change, from batteries to cars to 5G equipment everywhere, and the solar and wind technologies, of course, and their more efficient use. In all that, there is a competition, but the competition is not only there, also in digital sphere, data spheres, digital security, trade, and most importantly, on how to propel an evolution of the society through and beyond the paradox between the concerns for security on the one hand and freedoms on the other hand. While we are having so many, and many others, of course, dimensions of question marks, possible convergence or divergences among the world countries, of course, we do not have yet a system of or consciousness of global growth, as you rightly point out to as what it should be the driving force of human progress in the years to come.
I mean, it sounds to me almost as if you're talking about a Bretton Woods moment. And by that, I mean, Bretton Woods was the conference in 1944 to look at a global economy after World War II. That was part of what you call Society 3.0. I mean, is it really that case that we're talking about this is what we need, that type of high level type of meeting, whether it's in Glasgow in November, whether it's in a follow-up summit, to almost, as it were, reset the economies, or at least talk about a new platform for development?
As much as possible.
Okay.
Trying to be cautiously optimistic, of course. Somebody said that pessimists are stupid. Optimists also are stupid, but at least they are happy.
True. Okay. So to what extent has the tragedy of the pandemic opened up an opportunity for optimists, whether or not they're stupid, to say, you know, in other words, that there's been a change in technology or change in conditions, which opens up space for this Society 5.0?
Well, there are still basic questions, of course, which are more tactical rather than being strategic. Of course, they are about money and human sources. It is still the $1 trillion question. When will this end? Still, we do not know. There is also €1 trillion question. What lessons will the humanity learn out of that? And there is £1 trillion question. What will be the end cost of it? And then €1 trillion question, let's say, which states will become the world leaders in climate, in technology, in technological surveillance of the societies, and so on, so on. And also in Turkey, there is €1 trillion lira question, as you also touched upon during your introduction. What will be the exchange rate of Turkish lira versus US dollar, or should we have bought gold? And so we don't know, but the questions are still simple compared with the possible answers, which are very complex, and the consequences are in trillions. Global annual income is currently around more or less 90 trillion US dollars, 90 trillion. And it is 130 trillion when purchasing power is considered, as of course, beginning of the pandemic. Now, with the impact of the COVID-19 and its corollaries for economy and society, this figure is now significantly reduced and continue to be reduced, not only in monetary terms, but also in human terms, in institutional terms. So the situation is not bright. Now, through this, there are different trends. One is a more conscious human society. In Europe, in Asia, in Africa, in the Americas, people who want now to be governed more in a more transparent, more accountable way, and in more respectful way for the humans, and by humans, all the ecosystem is meant. So the nature, the resources, privacy, and all that. But there is also a big concern for security. It's good that we didn't have big terrorist attacks in the last year, but the security is now a broader sense, and the health security is very important. Vaccination policies and diplomacy has become a significant factor of international relations analysis. The health services, health products, and health data are now important tools of international relations and global competitiveness for each country. And where to find the right balance? To what extent the governments can exercise deeper control over the society, over the individuals, and to what extent the individual freedoms matter more than the security. So we are still in the middle of that in review, and we have to take distance, to have an idea. I don't want to answer like Chu Enlai, the Chinese prime minister of the 50s and 60s, who was asked his opinion on the French Revolution, and in 1960, his reply was, "It's too early to have an opinion." But it's too early, really. However, it's not too early, and it is even late to start defending at least a better society, better governance at the international level as well. This is our revolution to do.
Let me ask you a specific about the pandemic, because I want to believe, you're putting up a good case what we need to do. But on the one hand, in the pandemic, of course, we've had the call for collective action. This is a global crisis. We've got the World Health Organization as an institution that's supposed to bring that together. And then on the other hand, I'm observing what we call vaccine nationalism. So here in the United Kingdom, our vaccine is wonderful. Our vaccine is the best. We've had the squabble between the UK and the European Union just in the past week about distribution of the vaccine. We had people in the Trump administration talking about America's vaccine is the best. In Russia, our vaccine, Sputnik 5, is the best. China has its own vaccine. Hasn't this pandemic thrown up the problem of nationalism, even while we've been talking about the need for global solutions that you spoke about very eloquently in the past few minutes?
Yes, thank you. It's really well illustrated symbolically by the results of the US elections. Joe Biden won the highest number of votes in the US history. It is the largest electoral sphere that he owns now. But Trump being defeated, he also had the largest number of votes for an outgoing president. There is a wider society now in every country, not only the United States, involved in the daily issues of politics and having more or less polarized view of what has to be done. And populism, as you emphasized, is an important issue to deal with. Well, and then managing, of course, vaccination, it's obvious that either the world will become safe and COVID-free, or the world will not be safe, no matter in which country we are. There will not be isolated countries. No country can survive trying to be self-dependent. It's about globalization. In fact, globalization, of course, is about everything moving with more freedom around the planet. Money, goods, services, people, information, data, ideas, culture. But also it's about a higher increased mobility of viruses, biological viruses, financial viruses, digital viruses, ideological viruses, terrorism virus, organized crime virus, the corruption virus, unemployment virus, Disinformation virus, really very bad for the democracy as they have been living through, and the carbon dioxide virus, of course, CO2 virus. So the countries, whether for the pandemic or for managing all other diseases, financial, digital, or other contagious, other pandemics in other forms, they need to cooperate at least more than what they do today. G20 may be a good place, not for global governance, it's too early to talk about that, but for at least global policies.
Maybe one of the biggest changes in the past generation has been, as it were, the alternative economic model of China. And now we have China in the midst of, the Belt and Road Initiative, which is not only looking at a regional economic model, it has global aspirations. Is there a way to fit that Chinese model within this global vision that you have? Are they compatible, rather than seeing China, as the United States does, as a national competitor, that is actually I wouldn't say a threat to, but actually stands against that global vision?
It is against, of course. Maybe China is not that much expansionist or belligerent like we see, but it has still its own important problems domestically. Uyghur, Tibet, South China Sea, ecological problems, dirty soil, dirty water, dirty air, and social unrest, so many of them, thousands of them per year. On the other hand, a high density of technological surveillance on the daily life of the people, on their physical and social mood and evolution, and financially, of course. And then Chinese companies with state aid becoming more competitive in international markets vis-a-vis other companies which do not benefit from the same state backing. So yeah, there are so many problems, but China is also, of course, working on vaccine, on new technologies that are also good for the future of the humanity. They are in the space race for the moon, for Mars, and space race is really an important domain to observe the future of the humanity, and having really our feet on Earth for tangible analysis. We have to look at the space, as it was the case in the late 20s. This will be the case in the 21st century. For all the new technologies, we will probably be dependent on the avant-garde technologies that are being implemented in different space programs, satellites and so on. Thus, yes, China is there, but on the other part of the spectrum, there is not an ideal model, ideal Western democracy or economy or society. And when I say West, in the broader sense, all the OECD world, North America, Europe, Japan, South Korea, Australia, New Zealand, some Latin American countries. This is the OECD world with a common denominator of being democracy, based on rule of law, a free market, but also independent regulatory bodies, social development ideals, and so on. But whether China will become a distortion for the progress of these ideals, these principles of democracy, economy, and social development or not, it will also depend on this broader West's capacity to reform itself. There is the need for a new version of a new algorithm with 20th century democracy and economy and society and income disparity. We will not have a 21st century success story for the West. It's obvious. So it will depend on China. It will depend also on the West. More West will become successful in reforming itself and reloading a new algorithm of political and social and economic development. More China will be less in polarization to all that. And there will be sufficiently, not maybe a lot, but sufficient spheres of cooperation, partnership to avoid clashes. And after that we don't know. It's another story, but that belongs to the other half of the 21st century. It's too far now.
Okay. So from challenge again comes opportunity. I like that. But that brings me around to Turkey, because Turkey is in that geographic space between China, indeed between Asia and Europe, and between Europe and in a sense, well, between not only China and Europe, but between Asia, Europe, and the United States. At the same time, I introduced the national challenges that Turkey faces and has faced with its economy. To what extent in the next decade can Turkey be part of this global shift that you're talking about? Can it be actually at the center of this move for sustainable development?
It can. Turkey, in the laboratory of history, Turkey already tested some formula of success with good results. It has to, Turkey also has to reload those formula, but with 5.0 version, for the 21st century. First of all, Turkey has to look at Europe's evolution, and has to find new strategies, well integrated to different parameters, which are determining also Europe's evolution. We talk more or less to those about them. There are what I would call 5B effects for Europe's future. Brussels effect, the European Union soft power, new policies and their impact for the rest of the world, from European Green Deal to the European Digital Single Market, immigration policies, and that. Then second B is Biden effect, transatlantic partnership. If it is regenerated in some form, Turkey needs to find a place in that alongside with other countries outside these two main partners. So Canada, Switzerland, Norway, Mexico, and Turkey are in the same boat for that. So Biden effect and climate change as well. It's a Biden effect. Turn to Paris Climate Change Agreement. So Turkey, one of the few countries left outside, has to join the Paris climate change process, and with tremendous, very important effects, positively tremendous effects on its economy and access to international finance. The third B is Berlin after Merkel. So all the actors, including Turkey, should adapt to the new Berlin. To what extent it will be new, we will see, but there is a change in Berlin, so Germany is important. Fourth B is Brexit. Not only bilateral relations between the United Kingdom and Turkey, only there is already a free trade agreement, but Brexit triggers more the debate on the future of Europe. So if there is a differentiated integration system in Europe, which is better institutionalized than what it is today, Turkey can find a place in a different form of flexible integration, rather than being full member of the core European Economic and Monetary Union. So there can be also a way of thinking on Turkey's future in Europe without being victim of highly over-dramatized debate of Turkey in Europe or not Europe, and with all the emotions and populisms that it triggers in every side. And 5B is sort of, first one is Brussels, Biden, Berlin, Brexit, and the 5B is Beijing. We already talked about that, but it has implications on Turkey as well, because many countries, many companies, they have already started to think about and act for diversification of their production lines, supply chains, in trade, in industry, in logistics, tourism, finance, technology, health services, data, to no longer be too much dependent on China. It will depend from one company to another. We should not exaggerate, but there will be shifts between 5 to 55% from China to other countries. There are already some winners: Vietnam, South Korea, India is looking for that, Tunisia, Turkey, Egypt. These are all countries which will be looking for to have a better share of the global economy in this diversification. Not only diversification, but it's also nearshoring or onshoring. So bringing the production or the supply chains or the value networks closer to Europe, closer to the United States, closer to Europe, or into Europe. And Europe is more important for Turkey since it is its most important trading and investment and tourism and technology partner. So Turkey can benefit from that. It has the advantage of proximity, but that proximity is determined in terms of geography, of course, also somewhat in regulatory terms and political terms. But for the last two, political proximity and regulatory proximity, Turkey has been losing ground in the last years. So Turkish foreign policy and democracy and rule of law should be back to the European track Turkey needs democratic reforms for this and reforms of rule of law. And Turkey should up, so this is for the political proximities part. And the future of Europe debate more triggered by Brexit will help Turkey for this. And then secondly, on the regulatory side, there is already a customs union between the European Union and Turkey. But it has to be reformed because it has become an anachronism since it was concluded in the 90s, in a time when there was no WTO, World Trade Organization, there was no internet, there was no China and Russia as economic actors as they are today. Therefore, we need a new customs union, which has to cover also services, agriculture, public procurement, conflict resolution mechanisms. So that will be a customs union 2.0, but we have to go beyond that. We need a customs union 5.0 for Turkey-EU relations. It has to be a customs union which integrates Turkey also to the European sphere of policies in digital single market, in European Green Deal and social development, social progress issues. It is likely, it is in the interest of all parties. There is even a 6B in favor of Turkey. European business community supports this vision. I served for a while also as a executive board member of Business Europe, the Confederation of European Business, where the major business associations of the European countries are members. It's the NATO of the European business. From, for example, United Kingdom, CBI, Confederation of British Industries, is a member. From Germany is BDI and BDA. From France is MEDEF. From Turkey is TÜSİAD and TİSK. So Business Europe very openly in its strategy plans for the economic recovery beyond the pandemic, it includes this view of customs unions modernization with Turkey as a tool for economic policy for the European Union, for European interests. So the same for Turkey, of course, it's symmetrical. It's a win-win. It's even triple win. It will be good for Europe, good for Turkey, and good for the neighborhood. All that matters is that Turkey better implements better policies and implements them better, combining democracy, rule of law, ecology, social progress, and good economic governance, starting with central banks, independence, and the Ministry of Economy's accountable and transparent decisions, and structural reforms to be launched. They will, of course, have positive effects in the midterm, but the way of launching a serious process will already inject optimism and dynamism into the Turkish economic caters for growth, for trade, for investments, for all of them. And structural reforms are really tangible issues, starting with the constitution, education, financial markets, labor market, and research and development policies.
So much to watch, so much to do, whether it's Turkey, whether it's China and Europe, whether it's the globe. But for now, I want to thank you